Hello, this is my presentation on the Roaring Twenties. Introduction. The definition of the Roaring Twenties refers to the 1920s decade, which was an era of very economic prosperity, cultural change, social change, technological change, a very developmental stage for the United States. Um, And so some historical context is that following World War I, the United States experienced a period of rapid industrialization, urbanization, technological advancement, and it set the stage for the Roaring Twenties, in which um, all of these industries boomed, as well as the stock market. So first up comes the economic boom. So the widespread adoption of consumer goods such as automobiles, radios, and household appliances fueled a consumer spending spree, and this boomed the stock market for a period um with rapid growth. And Dow Jones Industrial Average reached record highs. And usually the stock market never goes this high, but because consumer spending was so high in the Roaring Twenties, it was one of the highest points of the U.S. economy in the past century or so. And the economic boom was created because in the 1920s, people had a lot of money, and a lot of people also were spending monies in lavish parties and etc. And one of this is also explored in a book called The Great Gatsby, in which this era of economic boom is further explored by the author Fitzgerald, and how he labeled this economic boom as one of USA's downfalls later on. Um, and then there was also prohibition to drinking introduced by the 18th Amendment, and basically, the United States banned the manufacturing, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages, but um, a thing called speakeasies were illegal establishments where alcohol was sold and consumed, and this was seen as a rebellion against the government and a pathway for social change. And this also led to a lot of big parties, as discussed before. Then there was also the Jazz Age, which developed from the 1920s, and so it basically, whenever you hear the 1920s, you always think of jazz music because jazz music started booming around that era. And it was associated with freedom and liberation and experimentation. And it was a great segue from World War One into prosperity, and it gave people hope as well. And the Harlem Renaissance also happened, where African American artists, musicians, and writers in Harlem, New York, made significant contributions to the cultural landscape, changing racial stereotypes and celebrating Black identity. And so this was all part of the Roaring Twenties as well, more the cultural side of things. And then another thing in the 1920s was women's liberation. Flappers, also known as young women, rebelled against traditional gender norms, and embraced short haircuts and short skirts and a liberated lifestyle. And the 19th Amendment was actually also passed in the 1920s, where women got the right to vote. Um, and this made a significant milestone in the women's suffrage movements. And so the 1920s also was a great era for women's freedom movements and etc. And you can also see in the 1920s, in many pictures, women were partying and drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes just like men were, because the women were now considered to be more freer people, and they were not following social norms as before the World War, and the World War One affected and played a role into the Roaring Twenties like this as well. Um, some technological innovation that happened was Henry Ford's assembly line production, that made cars more affordable and accessible to the masses, transforming American society and culture. Um, because of Henry Ford's assembly line, cars became much more affordable to Americans, and so a lot of Americans' disposable income went into buying cars and other goods. And Henry Ford's assembly line not only helped car production, but is now used still today in many industries, in textiles, and in general consumer goods like t-shirts, toothpaste, um, and a lot of other things. And the radio and mass media also boomed in the Roaring Twenties. The proliferation of radio broadcasting enabled the widespread dissemination of news, entertainment, and advertising, which also led to shaping pop culture and consumer behavior. They also introduced ads at this time through radio and mass media. And so uh, not only not only did this further contribute to the economic boom, but it also changed a very big part of the I would say American culture um and consumer behavior, not only in America but worldwide as well. Some social change that happened was the migration and urbanization of rural to urban migration, because the growth of cities um fueled a culture and demographic shift, leading to the emergence of vibrant urban communities. And the Roaring Twenties also changed values, and social norms were loosened and added towards marriage, and traditional morality were also changed. And you can see this through many images of the Roaring Twenties, as shown in previous slides as well, in the title slide, that a lot more people were now free, and a lot of people went from the rural areas to urban areas, because the urban areas had all the industrialization, the lavish parties, the cars, all the fancy stuff. And so a lot of people started moving to cities, and this also led to the great economic boom as urbanization took off. That also led to the economy growing in significant ways. Um, but the economic booming also led to economic inequality and uneven prosperity. While the 1920s was a era of prosperity and happiness for a lot of Americans, wealth and income was uh, very unequal, with the benefits of economic growth uh, disproportionately favoring the wealthy. And there was an agricultural crisis as well, where farmers faced economic hardship due to failing crop prices, overproduction, and mounting debt, leading to the rural poverty and discontent. And so food was still needed to be produced, but a lot of people um, were going to urban cities and urbanizing, and so a lot of the agricultural side of things in America started to fall because of that. And then the Wall Street crash of 1929 also happened in the Roaring Twenties, and again, was because there was a lot of debt, and that economic boom that I was mentioning earlier. Um, a lot of people started spending on a lot of lavish things like parties and etc. And that led to the beginning of the Great Depression, where the stock market crashed, and there was a lot of debt, and so people who were very rich in their banks couldn't pull out their money, and a lot of investors lost all their money in a very quick amount of time. And October 29, 1929 is also known as Black Tuesday because that was the day that stock prices plummeted, wiping out investor savings and triggering a decade-long economic downturn. And this is why a lot of people now analyze the Roaring Twenties as lessons for the future, because the 1920s, a lot of people spent on unnecessary things, and that built up a lot of debt and ultimately led to the crash of the economy and the Great Depression. And this was a big problem, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt had to come up with elaborate schemes, and the U.S. took a lot of time to recover from this. Um, so the legacies of the Roaring Twenties, the cultural legacy is that the Roaring Twenties left an indelible mark on American culture, influencing art, music, fashion, and social norms for decades to come. But lessons learned were the excess of Roaring Twenties coupled with the devastation of the Great Depression. Um, Showed how we need to financially regulate and have social safety nets and more equitable distribution of wealth, because as we learned from the stock market crash of 1929, that crash was really fatal to the US overall, and it would not be a good thing if that happened again. And it took a long time for the US to recover from that. And a lot of industries took a big impact from that. And this is my researched MLA citations and bibliography. And that is the end of the area of the 1920s. Thank you.